Welcome back to Cohort W. I'm your Season 3 host, CW3 Susie Albert. Today for Episode 11, we hear from Sergeant First Class Leyton Summerlin and CW5 Fatima Nettles about how to get involved in Army conversations that propel us forward in operations and the opportunities and roles of warrant officers in this process. We will hear about the Harding Project, Line of Departure website, Muddy Boots Forum, what discourse is, and a guide to assist us in expressing our ideas in writing in our units and in professional military education. We also hear about fellowship opportunities. And speaking of fellowship opportunities, my time as the Cohort W host is coming to a close. If you would like to be the next voice of Cohort W, applications are due no later than 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on 16 September 2024. Please stay tuned to the end of the episode for additional information, eligibility criteria, and application information. But let's get to it today and hear from our guests.
My name is Sergeant First Class Leyton Summerlin. I'm the Deputy Director for the Harding Project.
I am Chief Warrant Officer 5, Fatima Nettles. I currently serve as a National Capital Region Warrant Officer Recruiter, but I just finished my duties or additional duty as the Executive Officer to the first Chief Warrant Officer of the Army, CW5, Yolandria Dixon Carter. I completed both positions together for 2 years, and it was a great experience to understand the Army from bringing warrant officers from the NCO Corps and understanding the strategic impact and how warrant officers are important at the strategic level.
Yes, ma'am, and that is absolutely why I know Sergeant First Class Summerlin and I wanted to talk to you about your perspectives today, is operating at that level and seeing from that level the strategic requirements of warrant officers and sort of the direction we are modernizing and the impacts that these decisions are having. I first want to ask you if you are willing to share your personal philosophy on warrant officership or your leadership philosophy on warrant officership, just to provide some context for our listeners that are getting to know you for the first time.
Oh, absolutely. So from my perspective as a Chief Warrant Officer 5 that's been in for 26 years of what a warrant officer is and what a warrant officer should be, is warrant officers should be subject matter experts. But being a subject matter expert is never enough. The only way that you can take your subject matter expertise into understanding, into actual execution, is if everybody understands that you are the subject matter expertise and you are able to convey that information that everyone needs to be able to operate on your subject matter expertise. And the way we do that is through communication, whether it be oral or written. We need to be able to share our subject matter with the personnel that are executing whatever in that realm of our subject matter. So warrant officers are subject matter experts that need to communicate to those to make the right informed decision. Additionally, warrant officers are leaders. They are standard bearers. So everything that they do and how they behave should be something that someone can emulate or want to emulate. It should always be good and of good discipline. So warrant officers are leaders and warrant officers are subject matter experts.
I really appreciate that. I think that that's just we couldn't have had a better intro to the topic that we're discussing today, which is about professional discourse. And CW5, Leonard Momney, started our Warrant Officer Journal about a year and a half ago now. So hugely exciting for the Warrant Officer cohort. We have our first professional journal, and it's called Strength and Knowledge Journal, and it's available through Army University Press, and I will include the link in the notes for this episode. So we were incredibly excited when we heard that 4-star General Randy George was interested in revitalizing interest. So really pouring more resources, more interest, and generating more interest in the Army's professional journals.
And one of the things that I experience here at USAWalk is that we have students that come through, and that's through walk through ILE and through SFC, who have incredible ideas. They've accumulated, immeasurable experiences, and born from that, which is one of the things that warrant officers are required to do as part of our definition, is be innovators. And they don't know what to do sometimes with the ideas that they have. So I'm wondering if you can sort of introduce the Harding Project, because it's such a critical endeavor in giving a pathway to people that have great ideas to expressing, sharing, and making meaning out of those ideas. I'm wondering if you, in your own words, can kind of describe what the nature of the project is.
So the Harding Project is General George and Sergeant Major of the Army Weimer's initiative to renew professional discourse, primarily through writing and by revitalizing the Army's journals, like you just mentioned. And I think the good segue into that what you were just talking about with the young W01s that have these great ideas, or anybody really. The point of a journal in general is to reflect on an experience, or write down a thought or an idea. It's the one that's on your bedside that I'm talking about right now, right? Like the personal journal. And the whole point is to make you better in some way, shape, or form, right? Maybe you had a bad experience and you write it down, you reflect on it. What can I do better next time? What should I have done? All those things. And then the next time that you're in that circumstance, maybe you'll act differently or you'll react differently, whatever the case may be. Or you write down your thoughts and you explore these different ideas that may be going on in your head throughout the day. But the whole point is that you write, you reflect, and then you get better. I tell everybody that the Army's journals are no different. And that's why I always prefer the term journal, because it reminds people that it's not a TMZ magazine. It's not the New York Times magazine where they're just keeping you informed about something that's happening in the world, or in this case, within your branch or within the warrant officer cohort. The point is to reflect, to get better, to share an experience the same way that you would share it with yourself in a personal journal. And so, when you talk about these young W01s that have these great ideas, the journals are absolutely the place to go put them, because, for a number of reasons. One, it gets put on the record, right? So even if your idea doesn't change the world in the next 2 weeks after publication, it gets put on the record. Lieutenant Colonel Griffiths and I, for the audience, Lieutenant Colonel Griffiths is the director for the Harding Project. He's the one that's spearheading it. We read so much of the journal's archives, and there are so many great ideas out there that, if you're able to find them, you're able to research, you're able to get better that way. You're able to formulate better ideas. You're able to adapt and learn from those experiences in the past more quickly. And so, like I said, even for your W01s who have these great ideas, that is why it's so important to make sure that you share and contribute. Whether it's a thought, an innovative idea, something that you just think needs to get brought up for discussion. Even if you don't have the right answers, you can always give that call to action at the end that says, hey, let's figure this out. I've identified a problem. I don't know how to get to the answer, but let's figure this out. And then through that, you can even build a community of people who are interested in it.
Within the context of professional discourse, where do you see the warrant officer's role? And as you discussed, communicating and being a steward of the profession and really being an expert in their capability, where do we fit into the Army's professional journals?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think we are, the ones to definitely submit to professional journaling. Why? Because we do have a subject matter expertise that we can inform leaders to make informed decisions, right? So how do we, we do that through our communicating with our leaders and also writing to our leaders and documenting those things as well. So I always tell people that warrant officers look at things just a little bit differently. You know, officers and NCOs, they look at a broad aspect of things, but warrant officers have this in-depth view of special professions or special, you know, systems, integration, modernization. They look at it from a special lens. And having that special look, it needs to be documented, right? It needs to be written down in order to explain it to those leaders who look at things broadly. How does this specific area impact how I need to make a broad decision that may affect everyone, right? And then you have warrant officers in each field, right? So you have and a commander can be in charge of multiple specialties, right? And have multiple warrant officers. So how do you get all that information from all those warrant officers and be able to, you know, conceptualize it all and then distribute it in a wise decision? Warrant officers have to be able to understand the commander's role in taking all the information. It's just a portion of the warrant officer information that the commander has to execute on. It's a whole bunch of stuff. So we have to make sure that warrant officers express that information in a way that the commander can understand, can also integrate the other aspects of information coming from other areas and then execute with all informity. So that's what I think. And I think that is like the purpose of discourse, right? Is to document your profession, lessons learned, lessons observed, you know, mistakes that were made, things that we did to correct mistakes, courses of action. Warrant officers need to be able to share this with their commanders to allow them to make good decisions. And warrant officers have to be aware that they're just a small portion of the commander's decision-making process. So they have to make sure that the information that they are sharing is understandable and is also able for that commander to know how to integrate it into the bigger plan.
And I love that you just connected it, right? So like individual betterment, like we do get better when we think and reflect on our experiences, when we start to analyze our experiences, maybe synthesize our own solutions out of those experiences. And that is a critical part of like individual growth. And also I hear you connecting it with the journals as a platform to a larger community, which like, as we continue to, and I'm going to buzzword it, right? As we continue to modernize that, like, how do we become connected when in reality, in like operational units, in any unit, the reality is you are right now, you are responding so quickly to so many changes that it becomes difficult to see outside of your day-to-day like response mechanism. And what this is saying is like, hey, if you accumulate some ideas, and I want to bring a call back because you used a term that you have used in another podcast. You said a call to action. We have a tendency to think that like journaling is like this, or like writing is this academic endeavor. And in reality, it's conversation that we have committed to on paper. And I love the way that you, in the Sergeant's Time podcast, you talked about that, like, we all learn throughout our lives, like school, you know, no matter what type of school you went to growing up, and then PME, whatever type of PME, professional military education you're doing now, we learn that it's intro, 3 main points, 3 main body paragraphs, and a conclusion. And what you sort of like demystified in the Sergeant's Time podcast was that in reality, most journals, they're looking for is a hook, which is something that gets attention, a story that's told, which might be an accumulation of some facts or some research that you've done, but it's told in a way that's accessible and personalized, and then a call to action at the end of like, and therefore the solution or the need to find a solution, right? That call to action, that conversation is so critical, not just for personal development, but for our entire, and I know that it's such a like dramatic connection, but like our modernization moving forward requires that we share ideas. And I want to segue into what you and Lieutenant Colonel Griffiths are developing or have developed to make this accessible for this generation of, and I don't mean age generation, I mean like wartime generation, like the way that we use technologies in our day-to-day endeavor and the type of conflict that we're involved in. What have you created that makes journals more accessible?
Yeah, and that you just hit it right on the head. You know, the goal is accessibility for the scrolling soldier is the term that we keep using. Because like you said, on the day-to-day, soldiers are hyper active on their phones. And it's not even it's not even just the social media. It's not even just the games or whatever. It's, I mean, leaders, you know, walk into any brief and look in the back where all the leaders are, and they're all on their phones. And it's not, I'm not saying they're playing Candy Crush, but I am saying that, you know, they're working, and it's from the phone. It's on the phone. And so ultimately what that means is, you know, these journals help develop stewards of the profession. You know, me as an infantryman, I should be reading the infantry journal, right? And I should be reading others as well, but maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. But the goal is to make it more accessible for me, because right now they are incredibly challenging to get to. You know, if I want to read from the infantry magazine, which is actually one of the better ones when it comes to finding it online, it's still a challenge, especially if I'm looking for anything within the archives. I mean, it's so sporadic and hard to get to, and unless you live and breathe the journals like Colonel Griffiths and I, there's not a lot of people who know how to get to this vast body of knowledge that the Army has. And so all that to say that accessibility is key. So, you know, we partnered with the Defense Media Agency, DMA. They are helping Army University Press develop a website called Line of Departure, and that accessibility is the goal. You know, trying to compete with everything else that's going on in a soldier's life. You know, once again, everything from social media to work to family. I mean, everything goes through the phone. That phone, I mean, it's your third arm at this point. And so as you're trying to compete with these things and you're trying to give soldiers the ability to, a chance to steward the profession even more through the Army's journals, like you have to make it web first and mobile friendly. It is the only way. Right now, like I said, right now, you know, DVids is not phone friendly. It's barely web friendly in my personal opinion. And it's so hard to find things that you want. All of the archives from Army Sustainment or the Infantry Journal or any of the branch journals, to include, military review is a little bit better, but any of the branch journals, any of the archives are so incredibly challenging to find right now. And so that's another part of this is we have the Line of Departure website that will consolidate all of the branch journals and periodicals, Army's periodicals, under one umbrella. And then, you know, another benefit to that, what I call a peripheral benefit or an unexpected benefit, is that, you know, as an intel warrant officer, you know, you may be very engaged with the military intelligence professional bulletin, MIPB, and the things that are being written in there. But when it's consolidated under one umbrella, you might see something from Infantry Magazine or from Armor or from Field Artillery that, or Army Communicator, that you wouldn't have seen otherwise, that still pertains to you. You know, how do you lower your electronic emissions, right? Like maybe there's an article written by a sergeant major, you know, and I'm referring to one that was just recognized on the Chief's recommended reading list just recently. That is a great piece about how to lower emissions and what leaders can do to train this stuff. And you know, that applies to everybody. That's not just that's not just a 25 uniform, 25 series or signal branch problem. That's everybody. So the joke that I keep making when it comes to Line of Departure is that if we're supposed to think in a multi-domain space, you know, across the different domains, then we also have to start reading outside of, you know, my lane. You know, we are very two-dimensional right now, where if you're an infantryman, you stick to infantry stuff. And
right.
You know, the Line of Departure will definitely help do that. So
you bring up such a great relevant point for warrant officers. And one of the things that we discuss here at WALKS, we give them like, hey, how do you search doctrine? And usually when you're searching doctrine, you're searching for doctrine that informs your own specialty or capability. And I have started adding to that block of instruction. And like, admittedly, am I partially motivated because I think the world of Tiffany Zink. I think the world of the director of the Combined Arms Research Library. I think she is brilliant. I love hearing her speak. I love the resource that she provides to the world. But I have started introducing the Ike Skelton Library and telling the students, like, hey, if you want to see where ideas sort of exist in that aren't it's like about doctrine, but it's not doctrine. It's like people's interpretations across multiple pieces of doctrine, multiple pieces of policy, potentially in action, in operation. So it's not this thing that exists black and white on paper in what feels like very finite terms, which is not the intention of doctrine, but we'll talk about that another day. But like, pull that open where you find these like theses, and you find white papers, and you find this massive repository of ideas. And what's crazy is that I have historically anticipated in the 3 years that I've been a putter walk, that they'll be like, oh, I love searching doctrine that's relevant to me. But what happens is immediately they like the Carl the best. Yep. Because it is discourse, it's ideas. It's not like fundamental guiding principles and terms that sort of create that shared understanding and that cultural understanding of what war is, what operations are, what capabilities are, that we find in doctrine primarily, right? But it's interpretations of how to use these to be successful, or like pitfalls, and they love it. And so when I think of the journals, I'm like, oh my God, they will like this so much more because it is simplified. Like a lot of the documents that you find in there, again, if they're dissertations or theses, they're going to be incredibly long and complex. But my students use that resource. And I feel like that's the Carl is such a gateway drug into the journals in the best possible way, because like we as warrants, I was talking about this on a capstone board for class 2420 yesterday. Like I asked them, like, why do you need to know all of these other things that exist if you are going to be a 948 Delta, if you're going to be, a 361 Mike, if you are going to be like this specialty, why do we teach you all these other things that exist? And the truth is that if they want to integrate their systems surgically and in the most efficient and effective manner, understanding the whole puzzle means that they can plug and play their piece like chess, not checkers. And that learning point is really achieved by the 5th week of walks. And again, just like you said, should I be reading as an intel officer? Should I be reading the infantry journal? Absolutely, because the intel process is meant to drive the operations process, is meant to create success on the battlefield. It's not about thinking well and being smart. It's not about creating the best PowerPoint that no one's ever seen. Largely what my life consists of. But it's about like, how does that turn into action? And the truth for us is that the action are operations, and that exists for all of us together. So I really appreciate that like communal and that functional element. And this is one thing that I love being in a working group with you, because you don't lose sight of like, the Harding Project, let's all sit around and like think about really good thoughts and like think really academic, smart things and publish it. But it's like, what is the point? And the point is that it impacts our actions, it impacts our communities, and it means that we can be more successful moving forward in what matters, which for us is operations.
I would like to say that I appreciate the efforts of the Harding Project and the line of departure, because sometimes we just have these grandiose ideas and this is the new idea. But when they developed the line of departure, they were considering the audience. And that is so important with communication, right? Oftentimes, on a Army.net or Army.mil, network, and then we're pressing this button to get here, and then pressing this button to get here, and then pressing it. By that time, we're tired of it. We forgot about what we were searching for, right? So not only did the Harding Project develop a venue for journals to go into, they made that venue accessible easily. And that's, I mean, that's the bottom line. It's easily accessible. If I have something that I want to look up, I can put that in the search engine and I can find that document. And oh, by the way, I can read it off my phone, as everyone does. Or if I like to print it, it's printed clearly without all the extra lines. And then if I learn more by listening to something, it also has an MP3 format, right? And it also makes it easier for the editors, of course, to get that information to the population faster, right? And it eases a little stress on them. So I appreciate the fact that we have re-energized the Harding Project, but we made it more accessible for people to have access to. And that is so important, because people don't want to get bogged down in pressing a bunch of buttons, and then they won't use it, right? They're used to going to Google, putting one word in there and getting all the information they want, or different sources for information. That's what we're looking for. So make it usable, you know what I'm saying? Make it easy to access. And then that's how you make sure that the intent of the Harding Project and professional discourse is met, because you're making it accessible to this generation and how they like to assess information.
I have so much appreciation for the energy and like how the Harding Project has really captured people who are so invested in sharing others' ideas and how that propels us forward. Are you familiar? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to add to that. And another appreciation I have is that, history often repeats itself. And although the way we respond to it may be a little bit different, from a theory perspective, it's all the same. So I do also appreciate that we go back to when armor was instituted and when infantry was instituted and when the Army went through a big transformation like we're doing now. And we are appreciating that information and making sure that we're able to reach back to see, hey, have we tried this before? And what were the outcomes of that? And it also, history and documents or journals from, back in 1920 or 1833 can also be our muse, get our to start thinking about, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Although we can't do it exactly like that, we can be in that vein and just add a little bit of modernization technology to it and execute it, right? So I love that we are not taking history for granted, right? We're not taking history for granted, and we're making sure we're not starting something new, but all we're doing is we're putting all the information we have, we're putting it into a repository or a one-stop shop that can be accessible. So that's also what I like about this project, is that we're not forgetting about history. We're not trying to start anything new. We're just trying to inform the institution of the Army in the best way we can and allow those users to have the opportunity to use that information as they see fit, and then also write towards it, as things have changed, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to bring up that you have you're aware of some different types of forums for different types of communities. And I wanted to bring up the Muddy Boots Forum because I don't know anything about that. And I was wondering if you could clarify that for me.
So the Muddy Boots Forum is the byproduct of a partnership between Sergeant Major of the Army Weimar and the NCO Journal. And the goal of this project, this forum, is that we have such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to our most senior leaders in general. This project focusing on the non-commissioned officer side. Just as an example, every MACOM CSM has been in the Army for over 30 years. And the amount of knowledge and wisdom that they have that they pass on, verbally when they travel around, they tell their stories and they tell, and it helps soldiers get better, right? In some way, shape, or form. And it's just a piece of advice, and it's based on the experience that they had. The entire NCO Corps is supposed to be based on experience. So the intent of the Muddy Boots Forum is to capture and immortalize those experiences that they have, that they want to share with the rest of the NCO Corps. I just briefed all the nominative CSMs on this a couple weeks ago at the Senior Leader Forum, and at the Leading Change Summit, and there was a lot of interest in it, which was great because the joke that I made in the brief is that every sergeant major in here has that story that they like to tell soldiers because they can feel that it resonates with them. And they're right. It does. It helps. It helps them mature. It helps them become a better leader. It helps them think differently. Whatever that story's intent is, they go around and they tell these stories. So I told them that the Muddy Boots Forum is their opportunity to share it with not just the few people that you'll meet when you battlefield circulate, but it's an opportunity to share it with the entire NCO Corps. And then, so, we publish it under the Muddy Boots section of the NCO Journal. You couple that with Line of Departure. It's now more accessible. It's supported by social media, so you're able to share it better, and now I'm a platoon sergeant back in the 173rd, and I'm like, hey, I just read the ForceCom CSM's article, and it maybe it didn't even resonate with me, but maybe I know that it would pertain to CW3 Albert because of something that she's going through or what she's working on, or some leadership problem that she's having that she told me about. You can share it now, you can get to it quicker, and it's a great experience that everybody can learn from. And everybody is working on their articles currently. we actually just got the first batch in from all the MACOM CSMs, which is pretty cool. And a lot of them decided to follow that hook message and call to action format, which is really cool. Like, I'm excited. I got to read SMA Weimers, and I'm excited for everybody else to read it. Like, it's, maybe that sounds kind of fluffy, but it is just really good.
I like hearing about that. And so a huge question that we get here, because 85% of our students are former NCOs. They ask, like, how do I transition to being a warrant officer? Because this thing is very poorly defined. And I like that it is, right? Like, I see benefit and flexibility, especially across
in vagueness.
You also know. Who doesn't like the freedom that comes along?
Right. Yeah. You're telling me you don't know where my left limit is? Okay. Yeah. Roger that. I'll make it.
I'll find it. Yeah. That's emblematic to who I am. And I know that my colonel is listening. And so my apologies to how much he has to interact with developing my discipline initiative. But it's just a huge question that I'm asked. It's like, how do I transition to this thing that it's like this amorphous identity from this thing that I really understood. And it's hard to let go of where you felt certainty and where you felt successful in your career. And the piece of advice that I give, which I did not learn until years, like too many years, probably into being a warrant officer. I'm like, what you just heard was like a shame noise for me. But what I realized is that, like, we are told that we're supposed to be dynamic teachers and competent warfighters, right? But we were those things as NCOs. And so, like, where's the transition? And what I told them is that, like, the difference for me is that you train the trainer. Like, you very much take a step away because you want everyone to feel that commitment and that ownership. Like, you want everyone in your section to, like, develop their identity and develop their understanding and develop the connections that exist, especially between the enlisted folks and in the NCO Corps. We want that to occur. It is like a necessary part of, like, how the Army operates and executes. And it's hard for us to let that go because we were good at that thing and we liked that thing and it brought us to a new place. So I told him, I was like, man, if you just start looking at, like, train the trainer, you are trained the trainer. You are, like, one, like, echelon removed from how personal and how beautiful the Army is at that, like, intimate level. And now you are training others to, like, enjoy and empowering them to execute that thing flawlessly. So us as warrants knowing about the Muddy Boots Forum helps us provide tools to our trainers for them to continue developing that thinking, that writing, that teaching, those facilitation, identities and abilities. And, like, that's why it's helpful for warrants to know. It's not just to, like, read it for ourselves, but also to empower others, which is what we are designed to do, to, like, teach others and empower others to share information. Because I think the number one easiest way to identify a counterproductive leader is one that tries to stop communications. That, like, says, you talk to me and only me. And this is a way that we can combat, that potential desire, right, to kind of be like, all subject related things come through me, and be like, hey, do your own learning, find something that you love and have a block of training on it, right? I want to transition to PME. So where we have captured soldiers for a couple of weeks, how do we give them the tools, or, like, how do we introduce the journals or integrate the journals into when we have that captive audience?
So, that was one of our main efforts, was, focusing on education and how do we integrate the journals into PME. One of the very low cost, high reward methods that we were able to execute with the NCO Corps was a simple citation requirement for one writing assignment per echelon of PME, from the basic leader course all the way to the master leader course. And so the idea is very simple. It's that each of these courses now has at least one, if I remember correctly, most have 3 different writing assignments. And so in each echelon of NCO PME, there's a citation requirement that you have to, for whatever you're writing about. If it's your persuasive essay in BLC, you would have to cite one of the Army's branch journals or periodicals. And the benefit of that is not even necessarily that, maybe the content, the whatever. It's like you just said, it raises awareness. It lets them know that it exists in the first place. And then another, this one is like, some people would argue that it's not PME, but that's okay. Another very simple method, we are encouraging all of the journals to move to web first, mobile friendly. And our thoughts on print are a little bit personal, but we're not telling branch journals that they should or shouldn't. We are encouraging that it's not their focal point. But what I have been espousing to anybody that wants to still print, put it where people are going to read it. And the joke that I made when I went to Leavenworth a couple weeks ago for that workshop was that they have a lot of great journals sitting on these shelves, but no one's reading them. Like out in the front office, no one's reading them. So when we go to Fort Moore here in just a couple of days, one of the things that I will talk to the infantry journal about is like, hey, the stuff that you're gonna print, what if you put it in the infantry bays in basic training? OSAT.
Yeah.
What if Army Communicator did that? Or anybody who's going to print, and they were to put those in the bays, the youngest soldiers would be able to, or they would have the chance to be aware that these journals exist. And if you put them in those bays, man, they're going to read them. But some of the other more PME focused efforts are, as you were in that workshop with me, helping develop writing resources for the different echelons of PME, as well as focusing on other types of professional discourse being integrated into different echelons of PME, anything from converting an academic essay that you wrote for PME, which is that 5-paragraph, 3-bodied essay that you were just talking about, to an article, and then getting it submission ready, and then encouraging people to submit it. You can't tell anybody that they have to, but that's one of the things that we're looking at as far as altering lesson plans and all of these different PME methods that we came up with at that workshop. They're going to take some time to be integrated into the lesson plans, and especially anything that is resource intensive. But between the writing centers and changing some of the lesson plans to focus on professional discourse writ large and that are centered on the journals. Those are some of the main ways that we've looked at integrating the Army's journal system into the primary military education system.
Do you see, and so I feel like what we've been talking about, especially with the accessibility, it sort of revolves around individual initiative or interest. Do you see like a usefulness for this to be taught formally in Army training and education?
Yes. So there's two reasons why I think it should be in professional military education. Definitely for warrant officers. And I'm going to start with the warrant officers. Of course, you want to teach the how to. How do I get my white paper or my journal up to be reviewed to see if it gets published? That's one thing. But the second thing is, as I mentioned before, warrant officers have a wealth of knowledge, because they have been in-depthly researching, executing in this specialty, right? But sometimes they don't have the confidence or the skill to put it on paper, to communicate effectively, right? So
yes,
I junior warrant officers to build their confidence, right? To actually know that, hey, my paper will be read, is that we start teaching it in the lower PME, starting at warrant officer basic course, and then, building on it in warrant officer advanced course, and then building on it in our senior level courses, right? With an expectation of your experience being seen as you've grown through PME. But first we have to let them know how to do it. And then we have to give them the confidence to let them know that, hey, your great idea, you've been able to, communicate it effectively through your writing for people to understand. You should continue to do this, right? So I do think it should be in PME. I think it should be a output requirement as well, right? I know at Fort Sill, they have a writing program, and we brought up, hey, what about the Harding Project? You know, we need to go ahead and look at all those cores and the institutions or the schoolhouses or COEs that have their own individual writing programs, and we need to require them to, hey, how about you integrate your program into the Harding Project? Right? We need to get that information out there because we have great warrant officers doing some great things and they're writing about it, but we do keep it in a silo, right? We're only keeping it amongst ourselves, you know, in the Warrant Officer magazine. And of course, thankfully for your journal that gets it out there. But I think we need to definitely talk to our leaders at these centers of excellence with their own writing programs, allow them to also be embedded into the Harding Project so warrant officers can add to that body of knowledge.
You know, I have very strong feelings about the environment in which education occurs and the military. I think that's something that we are modernizing currently across our entire force is like, how do we take lessons learned from the past, which, you know, maybe incorporated a different style of mission command or a different mentality in, you know, the way that we teach and train and get to today where, you know, you talked about our access to technologies, the different, you know, like barriers or benefits that sort of exist in like the soldier experience. And one of the things that's really important to me is like, how do we provide an environment in PME that does not create punishment out of writing? And so like judgment and stress and like sometimes quantitative grading can feel like very stressful, which in and of itself feels like punishment. Or, you know, getting something like working on something and then submitting it and then not getting much feedback or maybe just a quantitative assessment of what feels like something that was very personal to you because it is an expression of your ideas. I know this is something that we discussed in the working group and I said, my God, like first of all, we have to make dissent, you know, like a necessary part. Like we have to make arguing and we have to make disagreeing like a welcome part of our normal daily Army conversation, not something that's threatening to the senior folks. And then also, can we incrementally teach the writing process and give multiple iterations of feedback so that when somebody goes to submit something, you know, potentially to a journal and they give feedback, like our brilliant friend from AUSA, Ellen Toner, who is an excellent editor, when she gives you feedback and says, hey, these are things that I need you to consider to make your paper stronger, it feels like a path to success, not a punishment or a judgment on your ideas. And I do think that environmentally, that's something that I would like to see.
Now, I noticed you said that you're a teacher, right? But what do they really call us? They call us instructors, right? But I think we can be called teachers if we start to do things like this. We don't just say, here's this assignment. Come back to me 3 days later, 100 words, blah, blah, blah. No. How about you take us through how to get there? And maybe we do it like as a process, right? So everybody comes up with a subject matter, right? Once they have that subject matter, let's teach them how to take that subject matter and make it into a thesis, right? Or a bottom line, or what do you want? What's the big takeaway you want from them? And then how do we explain why we want them to believe this, have this takeaway through the body? And then how should I conclude all of this for everybody to understand what I just wrote about and why it's important, right? I think that is required, but that's teaching, not instructing, that's teaching. And if we taught it in PME, I think it would be more effective. And again, warrant officers have these great ideas and can talk in detail about it, right? To other warrant officers, I'm sure, or other people. So the key is in addition to being able to explain this thing, how do you explain it for everyone to understand its value, right? So that is a teaching thing. It's not an instructing. That's teaching someone. And it's important because warrant officers are typically quiet. They sit in their areas and they do their job, but they have a wealth of knowledge, They're good listeners. They see things from a different vantage point. I do think that we need to invest in their ability to, communicate effectively through writing. And we need to teach them that because we can execute very well. You know what I'm saying? But we want to make sure that this information is not only given to who needs to know it, but is also put into this historical data to be able to be looked at 100 years from now, and say, so I think it's important. And that word teach means a lot because it's very different than instructing.
I very much agree with that. And I know that there's some semantics that are being relooked, right? Counseling versus coaching. Like, have we fulfilled what the original intent was, or are things shifting as we modernize? And I really love the way that you talk about teaching. And that's good for me to hear as a warrant officer and as a teacher, because I do feel like sometimes I execute on intent. I execute to the desired end state. And the truth is about me being a CW3 is sometimes I do miss moments to guide and to coach, and it requires conscious effort. And it also requires a really strong and good leadership heart and time. And what we devote our time to really does indicate our priorities. So thank you so much for touching on that, because it's like helpful for me too, as someone who is responsible for this initiative, especially where I'm at currently at USWOC. I'm responsible for communicating these ideas. So I really appreciate that sort of like boost and motivation that you gave me as well.
And what I've seen in LinkedIn is that a lot of people feel that way, but they say, hey, until we change the environment, we can't be successful in this.
I don't like to subscribe to that. Like, we can't do anything until the environment changes. What does that mean? Like, you are part of this environment. Just do it. Just get it done. Right. You know, I need to wait for something to change before I can do something. Like, how about you be part of the change? Like, what that tells me is if somebody wants somebody else to fix the problem, and then I'll become part of the solution. It's like, no, that's not how life works, man. If you want the environment to change, you have to do something about it. And that quick side note, it's like my favorite takeaway from this real small, cheesy, simple parable story from John Gordon called The Coffee Bean. It's a great 5-minute read. I recommend anybody do it. It's awesome. If you want to change your environment, be a coffee bean, right? Like, it's phenomenal. I won't spoil it, but yeah, I'm sorry. That's like a trigger for me. I hate when people say, well, I want the environment to change. Like, no, you need to change the environment. Like, you need to be a part of that.
My friend, Phil Adesso, who came from 75th Ranger Regiment and is one of the most like tireless soldiers and thinkers that like I've had the pleasure of working with. He always said, be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Like, be the thing. Right.
Yeah. I've heard that before. Yep. Exactly.
Change the environment. And it stuck in my head because, like, even though I'm sure, like, everybody listening is like, I've heard that a million times across my life, I didn't. I didn't have it packaged in that way. And so when he said it, you know, when we were working together a couple of years ago, I was like, dang, like, I really always have a responsibility for myself, regardless of where I exist, what the environment is. I have this like power and this responsibility. And that is absolutely my point, is like, I love LinkedIn. For the reason that like it's such a great forum and repository for ideas. And I also love it because Dr. Trent Lithgow always lets us know what he's thinking. And it's always helpful. It's always like a tool for success. Like, every single post is like a potent tool that like I put in my tool.
And it's very practical. Yeah. It's not just conceptual or theoretical. It's something you can apply today. Yeah, it's always great.
Yeah, and with the resources that he provides and puts tons of work into, and then like kind of drops, you know, in like the most nonchalant manner in a LinkedIn post. Like, these like drips of information like really do that has huge impact. He alone as one person has huge impact on his institution, my institution, anybody else that's connected with him, if they take the time to like absorb and use those resources. So and of course, like, he's a celebrity to me. I think he's just like such a brilliant thinker in our time. Just like I think about Lieutenant Colonel Lisa Becker, you know, I like am number one fangirl of Lisa Becker and the Breaking Doctrine podcast, because again, that's like an oral repository of all of these ideas and interpretations and analyses that continue to propel us forward. But I think I cut you off. I made a note here. Yeah. And this, I'm totally fine. That's part of discourse, right? You had brought up the dissent piece though. And, you know, that we need to, you know, you were talking about somebody who said, I'll become a part of it when the culture changes or when the environment changes. There's a line in as much as I
I like the, sister branch banter, especially amongst the infantry, like between the Marine Corps and the Army. There's a line in Marine Corps Doctrine Publication 1, right? So they're like, it's their starting point. It's what every other piece of doctrine is based on. It's called warfighting. And there's a line in there that I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember exactly, but it says, from private to general, conversations must have candor and frankness, right? The idea is that, like, it doesn't matter if you're a private or if you're a general. Like, if an idea gets brought up and there's something wrong with it, or if a suggestion gets made and you don't think it's right, like, you should say something. And then, like, immediately following that, it says the behavior of yes men will not be tolerated. And I love that line. Now, I think it's worth it, going just past that. It says something to the effect of, once a decision gets made, however, everyone should own it as if it's their own, right? So, like, the intent is that, if you're my boss and you bring up this idea, I should be like, hey, I don't think that's right. If that's how I feel, right. I don't think it's right. But it takes, like we were just talking about, it takes an environment where I feel comfortable to dissent that way. And in a lot of places currently, that environment doesn't exist, and that's really sad. But how to dissent properly is a big part of it, because I do think that dissent is a two-way street. I think that discourse in general is a very give and take thing, whether it's from leader to subordinate or peer to peer. Or from author to editor. Like, it's all discourse that makes things better, right? Like you said with Ellen, and you have to. It requires vulnerability on one side. It requires humility on probably both sides. It requires maturity on both sides. And above all else, I think the biggest requirement for proper dissent is just the want to get better. Because then your ego goes away. Like, I don't care what anybody says about my writing. Like, if you have an opinion, like, I want to hear it, and then it will shape my worldview afterwards. And I think that if you have that drive to just want to make things better, and then whatever it is that you're writing about, whatever it is that you're passionate about or frustrated about, like we talk about often, you'll be open to other people's ideas, even if they are dissenting, right? And
right.
And we have Lieutenant Colonel Jameson, who wrote an article for the Military Review special issue that we have coming out, which is a how-to guide to professional discourse. And he wrote the article on how to dissent properly, right? Like, that's the intent of the article. And I love the title. It's With All Due Respect. It's my favorite title in that entire issue.
Great. Yeah.
And it's the reason we reached out to him in particular to help write that is, he wrote a piece that was a response piece to Lieutenant General Beagle, Lieutenant General Beagle wrote that piece because he was responding to a bunch of officers who had written on, I believe it was a website called the Angry Staff Officer. These young officers wrote a lot of their gripes and complaints, or just like things that they were frustrated with, on the website. The Angry Staff Officer, I believe, is the website that it started on. And then General Beagle wrote a response piece in Military Review called "We Hear You," and then Lieutenant Colonel Jameson took it a step further and furthered the discourse by responding, saying, "We hear you, but you're wrong." And it was dissenting from what General Beagle had said, and that's fine. They had talked about it, and nothing but good things had come out of it. Like, nobody got in trouble. Nobody, there's a lot of fear that, if I write something that doesn't align with my boss, or if it doesn't align with the Army, that you'll be reprimanded in some way, shape, or form, or there will be some kind of retribution. And so Lieutenant Colonel Jameson's piece talks about how you can be open-minded and make sure that you're safe, and that you're also not bashing people, right? Because that's another problem with dissent, is that a lot of people think that the only way that you can dissent is if you are overly aggressive towards your problem or with your leadership, but you can, and that's the great thing about writing is clear thinking. So whatever problem that you're having, if you work with your boss on something and you say, hey, like, I would really like to write about this because, I think that XYZ is an issue. And I know that you feel differently about it. But I think it's worth the discussion. There's no leader that should have any problem with that. And then you talk with your leader about it. You make sure that they know what your message is that you're trying to share with your branch or your cohort, whatever it is. And you make sure that everybody's okay. And it's just a win-win, right? It just opens up a discussion that you think is important. And
right.
You're not bashing your leadership saying, well, I don't think we should be in the field for 14 days or, and my leader's bad. Like it's much more mature than that. And out of those types of conflict is where great things come from,
retired Colonel Steve Leonard and I talked about that in episode 10 of like, God, it's like, sometimes I feel so resentful. Sometimes I feel so angry. Sometimes I feel like very powerless, which is an uncomfortable feeling for me. And like, what do you do with it? And what I hear you saying with this guide to dissent that's coming out, which I'm really excited about, is it lets you distill, down to the merits of the good idea that has been born from a friction point, right? So it's not the focus necessarily on what went wrong, but how to avoid that in the future or how to create something more productive from it, or like it's based on merit. It's merit-based professional discussion, not accusations.
It's not just blind rage. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Which sometimes is a necessary precursor. And like that's
for sure.
I love about the human experience is that like those things are allowed to exist, although they're unfashionable to discuss today, right? Like in like this day and age, like it's unfashionable to discuss. But how I love that the Harding Project really gives a mechanism of like turning that into action. And then now you're giving resources to refine it to make sure that the action is appropriate, helpful, productive, and propels you forward. I'm really glad that.
No, I was sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just going to say that the rest of that professional discourse guide, the how-to guide that's coming out in that special issue for military review is all about. We have it split up into sections, and so there's one section that is focused on helping people get their thoughts on paper. We have a great article that was written by Captain Theo Lipsky called "How to Write an Article," then we have, Dr. Trent Lithgow, who we've talked about and idolized on this podcast many times. He wrote, how to write with style, and kind of finding your voice and things like that. And then, and so there's a bunch of individual tools, and then there's an entire like unit piece, right? So, and the goal of that is how do you foster a culture of writing? How do you foster a culture of professional discourse within your organization? And what do unit leaders need? As just a starting point. And this is just to give an idea or a baseline model of, what it could look like in your formation to implement a unit writing program or how to foster professional discourse through discussion on some kind of online forum. We have tons of those already. And, it's like NCO forums. I'm sure the warrant officer cohort has, Facebook or WhatsApp groups or whatever that where a lot of good professional discourse is happening. I actually just recently got added to one by somebody I don't even know on Teams that is like phenomenal. Like I was blown away by how many resources are in this. And
that's cool.
And it's just a place where you can go and you can talk about these ideas. And that one was written by Lieutenant Colonel Eric Davis and Lieutenant Colonel Nick Frazier. They provide a great just baseline model and these terrific lessons learned about how you can mentor each other, mentor upward, mentor downward in a forum like that, and really drive stewardship just by caring and having this group of people that are interested in these different topics. Or to my last battalion commanders. My last battalion command sergeant major's credit, he had done something similar with our weapons squad leaders throughout our battalion. And I thought that was a really cool thing because, it just built this community that was very interested and very vested into what they were working on, and it made them so much better. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be this massive thing like the S1 net that has, hundreds of thousands of people. And it gets too big and you can't manage it. Like they provide a great guide on how to fan those sparks though. And that's what I told Colonel Davis and Colonel Frazier, that's why I love their piece so much, because I do think it's kind of the starting point for unit leaders is like, how do you cultivate stewardship within these like pockets of people within your formation, and it's as simple as identifying the guy who's super interested and super driven to run it. But then you just connect them with other people that are like-minded or have similar interests. And now you've just created a small group of, it could be 10 people, but they're constantly talking about SUAS or communications. And that's such a cool thing, because then I tell everybody that what that is, it's a perfect primer for writing, because it's a place that you can flesh out your ideas with other people who are vested in the same topics, and it doesn't mean that they have to agree with you. Oftentimes I hope that people don't, because I know that whatever comes out of our discussion is going to be even better.
Sure.
That's the great thing about this professional discourse guide, though, is that we set it up to where, how I think personally, it's kind of a step-by-step guide to fostering professional discourse within your formation, and then, but primarily through writing. And then there's the individual practical tools that the soldier who's trying to get that idea out, that WL1 who has that great idea, it gives that individual the tools that they need, the very practical guidance like we talked about, to get started, right? And just give you that little bit of confidence that you can get it done. It'll come out probably late next month into September, some time frame. Yep. And that's going to every company in the Army, by the way.
Nice.
That was a labor of love, but the goal is that each company is getting approximately 5 copies. And then it's also school heavy. So every academic institution is getting plussed up to share with students and, faculty members. Because once again, I can't say it enough. The entire intent of professional discourse and the journals and that what I keep calling the ecosystem that exists between the journals, the soldiers, and the academic institutions is like we said in the very beginning, it is the Army's journal. It is there for you to share your experience, share your insight, reflect, get better, discuss it with somebody else, argue it out, byproduct is something better, share it, put it on the record 30 years from now when they're wondering, why the XM7 was a great replacement for the M4, it'll be out there, that kind of thing.
When we look at discourse, I perceive that we're talking about disagreeing and, or maybe challenging status quo. And I'm wondering if you're willing to share your thoughts on how warrant officers can do that, sort of be that honest broker, tell hard truths, disagree. How can we do that? How can we communicate those things effectively?
So, this is, warrant officers, that's what they do. They give us the ground truth. They give leaders the ground truth. But we cannot do that without, number one, our leaders trusting us, right? It's trust, right? So we have to build trust within the leadership, right? And we also have to make sure that the leadership trusts our ability, right? So that's the first thing. We need to make sure that we are the standard. We are the subject matter. We are, you know what I'm saying? Like the be no do for warrant officers, for NCOs, we are the subject matter expert. No excuse about it. So first of all, we have to build trust into us knowing our profession. And then secondly, we have to come with facts, right? We have to come with facts. We have to come with, examples, right? Because we do have to get the buy-in of the leader, because we're asking a leader to understand that what they think is going to work is not going to work. They're not just going to go off, okay, what Chief said anymore. It's just too much of a risk right now. So warrant officers that are walking the straight line and being who they're supposed to be need to come with the factual evidence, right? And then have empathy in explaining that to that leader, right? We have to make sure we understand that leader may not know this aspect of it, but it's our job to ensure that they know it. And we have to have empathy to the fact that they may not have this knowledge that we come with, right? That's why we have to make sure we explain it to them factually with examples, because they're taking the risk, right? They're taking the risk, and we understand that, right? So I would offer that every warrant officer, don't assume that just because you say it, it's going to happen. Understand that commander or that leader is taking a risk of what you're saying. So give them all the necessary information that they need to make sure that they feel comfortable with that risk, and you feel comfortable with what the information that you gave them to take that risk if a risk is needed to be taken. That's how you do it. You know, it's a personal and professional task for a warrant officer, right?
Yes,
and it also understand that it's okay for that commander not to trust the first thing you say the first day you come into the door, because trust needs to be built. And we need to make that effort to build trust within our commands, because ultimate success means that us being able to be trusted by our commanders, so our commanders make informed decisions, right? We can't expect that right through the door. We have to work on it, and it's continuous work on it. And understand we are going to make mistakes. We are going to maybe we don't know a certain aspect, and we may have ill-advised. We need to be able to come back to our commanders and say, hey, you know, based on new information, or I just got this information incorrect. It's okay, right? Just know that we are subject matter experts. However, we are human, and our commanders are human.
Yes, ma'am. And I am listening to you talk, and what's sacred to me about the points that you're bringing up is that it resonates with a core philosophy of Mission Command, like mutual trust, like are we subject matter experts? Have we developed that competence? Are we pursuing that competence? And that leads to that mutual trust, and then kicks off the rest of, I consider it to be a chain, the principles to be a chain, and then you end at risk, right? Like sometimes you won't necessarily, as a warrant officer, be responsible for that risk from the decision that was made on, you know, an advisement that you had sort of thrown into the world or thrown at your commander. Like you won't be responsible. And I think that is a beautiful relationship in that chain between competence, trust, and ultimately risk.
Right.
While you were talking, I remembered my fiance, he's a CW2, and he went through the Fort Liberty program. So he's a 180 Alpha. And he, you know, our program, we make coins and we make shirts and sort of establish a class identity, and they choose a motto, etc. And he was asked, you know, in his class years ago to develop a motto. And the motto that they chose, the first time he told me, it was so powerful, and I really think that it connects to what you were saying, is it was be the example.
Mm-hmm.
And so the 180 Alphas who are given the opportunity, and you know, ours out here are usually kind of like slick and kind of like fun to say, and it's fun to make a sign around and all these things. And theirs was so simple. And I really feel like when I read that, it like the core of warrant officership was in there. Like we are supposed to be the example of our capability. We are supposed to be the example of leadership, of communication, of empowering others. And I think that you're exactly right, that professional discourse is the way that we can execute on that. And I really appreciate your insights and all the experience that you bring to this, and all the impact and accumulated years of service and dedication that you bring to this, to also empower others to start sharing their ideas and be courageous in doing so, which brings us to the place of learning and adapting quicker as our entire force.
I did want to highlight some individuals that have recently been appointed as fellows by the Harding Project. I just wanted a chance to really celebrate, number one, their individual accomplishment, and also acknowledge the sheer amount of work they have throughout contact across the force, right? And how much they're going to impact. And is it a year-long fellowship?
So it's 2 years. It's 3 years total. And starting with the second cohort, the way that it's going to work is you will go to, so you apply, you get selected, and you will go to school for a year. You'll come out with your master's, and and then you'll owe 2 years to your branch journal. So 3 years total, 2 years as the branch journal editor, working with the 1 to 2 civilians that are a part of that editorial team.
Very cool. Yeah, I was excited to see that of the 12 that have been chosen, there is one NCO, which I was tickled about. I think, is he going to be the editor for Special Warfare?
Yep. Him and Major Emily Lopez are the Special Warfare magazine editors, nice. Which was super cool. And, for all the listeners, the intent is that we share it across the different cohorts. The requirements, the rank requirements are right now E8, E9, CW3, CW4, and O3, O4. But ETPs exist for a reason, just like with that Sergeant First Class, who is now the Special Warfare magazine editor. Like it, if you're the right guy for the job, like that right. is ultimately more important than anything else. And the Special Warfare community made that clear, and I love that. With that Sergeant First Class. So the only thing I would want to say to the Warrant Officer Corps is that you guys are the subject matter experts in your field. I would encourage any one of you guys to really think about being a Harding Fellow, and then contributing, not just to the Warrant Officer Journal, because that is warrant officer focused. But when you think about an intel warrant officer, being a subject matter expert in that particular field, the amount that person can contribute is phenomenal. It's massive. And so the amount of stuff that I could learn from that person that I will never get to work with, but I can learn from that person, because of things like the line of departure website that consolidates all the branch journals under one magazine. And, the MIPB article gets, featured on the front page of the line of departure magazine or website. And I see this and it pertains to me because, I'm gearing up for a deployment or getting ready to go to the field, and we're going to be exercising, we're going to be doing MDMP or, whatever. Like, I can benefit from the Warrant Officer Corps so much, and just like any other soldier. And so all I can ever think about is like, man, I hope that the Warrant Officer Corps, gets over whatever fear they have of writing and sharing their experiences, just like any other corps. I'm not saying it's Warrant Officer in particular, but and starts contributing. You guys have so much to share, and I've never met a Warrant Officer that like didn't know their craft, better than the NCOs and officers around them. So that would be my message to you guys.
Informing our institution, our Army institution, our Army organization of the Harding Project, and the ability to share what lessons learned, new ideas, through the journal process, right? By journaling, by writing and submitting it. I was practicing what I was going to say during this interview with an NCO here in USAREC, and she said, I've never heard of it. And I think there lies the problem, right? Again, the soldiers these days are much different than we were, right? They can build efficiencies in anything we do through technology, right? And some of the things that we're doing out here, we could use that efficiency because we're lesser. Our force is not as large, but our mission continues to grow, right? So we need, streamlining and those things that those soldiers can bring. So I think that we need to do a better job, and it's my responsibility as well to share the Harding Project, to share what professional discourse is, to share, what Muddy Boots form is for, the enlisted, and then share about the lines of departure. I think that we need to do a better job as an institution, as an organization. We're sharing this information down to the lowest levels because it's given an opportunity for us to share information from all veins, from all ranks. But if all ranks don't know, then it won't be effective.
Yes, ma'am.
Everything I read from a warrant officer is always great. So
I'm excited that you feel that way. And I know Miss Nettles has compiled a bunch of thoughts on essentially our definition says that we're supposed to be innovative integrators of emerging technologies, dynamic teachers, and competent warfighters. And that everything that we just discussed is a mechanism to execute on those three roles that we're supposed to be fulfilling. So thank you so much for your time. As always, I know that you are stretched so thin and you're in such high demand, being, deputy director of this project and doing just like balancing all the things that you balance. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on and educate us. And I noticed that you ended on a call to action, which is so very you.
Thank you so much for your time and for the efforts in coordinating this and for sharing your ideas. I really appreciate it. And I feel the same way that, I think of this, and I'm hopeful that in the warrant officer community, because now we have a journal, our own journal, I'm really hopeful that even just the vicinity, of warrant officers at USAWOC learning about the journal, where the journal is published, the journal is edited, and where the staff exists. I'm really hopeful that we can get this information out. But I agree that I think that to have the biggest impact, we got to continue to share what the Harding Project is doing and what journals exist, how we access them, and they're making it so easy. And so hopefully with some more outreach, we can get more folks involved. But thank you again so much for your time and your insights.
All right, and I appreciate you. Thank you, and keep doing what you're doing. If I can ever help you, let me know.
Thank you, ma'am.
If you have any questions or feedback on what you want to hear more of this season, please email warrant.officer.history@gmail.com. As always, for updates and information, please visit the Warrant Officer Historical Foundation at warrantofficerhistory.org. This is an incredible way to remain connected to the cohort, as well as involvement in the Warrant Officer Association, VFW, or Strength in Knowledge Journal. So I know that all of you have been waiting throughout this episode to hear more about the announcement of the fiscal year 2025 Warrant Officer Historical Foundation Non-Resident Fellowship. Applications are being accepted currently for the fellowship, and fiscal year 2025 is the fourth year the Warrant Officer Historical Foundation has offered a fellowship, and the eligibility criteria this year remained broadened. The fiscal year 2025 fellow will help the Warrant Officer Historical Foundation creatively tell the continuing story of the U.S. Army Warrant Officer cohort and help the foundation accomplish its mission to preserve and educate. The Warrant Officer Historical Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization affiliated with, but distinct from the U.S. Army Warrant Officer Association, dedicated to promoting the public profile of the U.S. Army Warrant Officer image and legacy. The Warrant Officer Historical Foundation has worked closely with the National Museum of the United States Army and the Army Heritage and Education Center. Eligibility criteria is the following: U.S. Army Warrant Officer, CW3, CW4, or CW5, any component, any branch with a bachelor's degree. The timeline for applications, September 16th, 2024 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is the deadline for application submission. Interviews will occur September 17th through the 30th, and October 1st, the fiscal year 2025 Warrant Officer Historical Foundation Fellow will be notified. The 1st through the 28th of October will be further development of the fellowship concept, and by the 29th of October is announcement of the fellow and concept at the 52nd annual meeting of the members by Warrant Officer Historical Foundation President, the one and only Al Curving. To apply, please submit your resume, curriculum vitae, officer record brief, or soldier talent profile, a sample of creative work, whether it's print, audio, visual, video, or digital, and a letter of recommendation. Any questions that you have and the application, if you choose to apply, please send to the Warrant Officer Historical Foundation Director of Strategy, CW5, Russell J. Hauser, the creator of the Cohort W podcast. You can reach him at warrant.officer.history@gmail.com or Dr. as in Dr. Russell.Hauser@mail.com. Thank you so much. I hope to see you apply. And if anybody has any questions, please reach out to the email. I'd be more than happy to expand upon my experience, the podcast, or any other questions that you may have. We will see you next time.